The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Frankly Speaking. I'm your host today, Frank Zabarick, and I'm kind of excited about my guest today. People who have been following my show since its inception know that like 2 years ago, I had an executive director of a group called the Nathan Project. His name is Rick Cardos, and he had some it's on sex addiction and people who are fighting the porn addiction in their lives. Last year, I had a couple on, Andrew and Jessica Locke out of Manchester, and they gave their testimony. And today, actually, after this interview, my two guests are going to the Nathan Project benefit dinner at the Trinity Baptist Church, and they're going to be the guest speakers. And I'm blessed to have them there as my today as my guest. John and Erica Daniels, how you doing today?
Good, thank you.
Very well, thank you.
Okay, so I realize that every couple, every individual has their own specific testimony. Could you tell my TV audience exactly how, your testimony here and how you got involved in a porn addiction support group like the Nathan Project?
Sure. I grew up in a, fairly typical family and everything, and the germane to this topic today, I was first exposed to some pretty hardcore pornography when I was about 8 years old. And that started off a kind of a preoccupation with what I had seen in that video. And actually, coincidentally or incidentally, that was playing on somebody's television in the living room as the family was going about their normal day. They had hardcore pornography, the father, and they were just, the mother was making, I remember it distinctly, she was making, I guess, lunch for the kids, and we were, running back and forth as kids, just after we got done riding our bikes, and we went out and rode our bikes some more, but that was playing in the living room. And I had never forgotten that, and that kind of set off an interest in that area as a young boy, and then a preoccupation. And then that's something that I dealt with for a long time. I was always kind of looking for it, on the lookout, and I would find it once in a while. And that went into my teenage years, and just I guess you would say an unhealthy preoccupation with it, and viewing it always in secrecy, of course. That's not really something that you would do out in front of everybody in the middle of town or whatever. But so there was always an element of secrecy and a little bit of an adrenaline rush when you'd get to do that. But then later on, it started to affect, of course, my view of women. And but then I went and got married, and I thought that would fix that problem. And like so many expectations, it kind of, it didn't work out the way that I had hoped. My first marriage at the time started to deteriorate and started to struggle a little bit, and I fell back into those habits as well as alcohol. And then as a result of that, I had seen a counselor for a little while, and I had dealt with some of the things that I was dealing with in life, some fear and some anger and that sort of thing. My anger, by the way, was never loud and throwing things. It was always more of a sullen anger. But one of the ways that I would always medicate, I would always go back to it, knowing that it was wrong, believing that it was wrong. I was raised in a church. I was, and I am a Christian. And so there are some things that we know not to do and some things to do, but it was always irresistible. It was always something that was always calling, and I would always go back to in times of great struggle, in times of fear or anger, and it was just something to kind of medicate that with. Then I stopped looking at it for a couple of years. For a little while, I was able to not do that, and then we got married. And we had actually known each other even in the first grade, and I told her if we'd gotten married in the first grade, we could have skipped, so much. We could have saved so much time, I guess. But we got married, and we each had a child from previous marriages. And then when we got married, 9 months and 1 day after we were married, we had a boy. And so
amazing.
He's our honeymoon souvenir.
And so we had a blended family in that way, if you will, like different families coming together into one family. And so that's okay, except that we had some unrealistic expectations when we got married, and this all comes into play. I thought that she would make a wonderful mother for my daughter, and she thought that I would make a wonderful father for her daughter. It turns out that we were both mistaken. There are natural tensions that occur in that situation. We didn't know any of that. And honestly, we hadn't had anybody tell us that we would have those frictions. And so she went back to dealing with things in the way that she did, and I went back to dealing with it in the way that I did, which was alcohol and pornography. And that preoccupation with anything sexual outside of the bounds of marriage takes its toll on the marriage. And so as I was seeking those things and doing those things, I started to be more and more absent from my family. Now, I'm a workaholic. I love work. I would gladly work 23 and a half hours a day because I enjoy that creativity. I enjoy that production. And at the time I was a tree climber. I did some things.
Wow.
And so I had the physical exertion. I had the adrenaline in other areas, but I was still in the conflict that we had in our marriage. I was still going back to that. It was an unwanted addiction in my life. Now, workaholism, that's something pretty cool in America. Pornography, not so much within a marriage, and neither is workaholism within a marriage, because I wanted to be a father on more than just paper. And so that created a lot of tensions in our family. I remember some of the words that our daughters would use to describe us are not that kind in those years, especially me. Oblivious, absent, those sorts of adjectives that would just be very, not what a father. You want to be Superman. Every father is a Superman. We are superheroes, but we always have something in our way. That was in my way. And so one night, actually, we had a couple times of trouble in our marriage, and after one time, we were working on our marriage together, and we were actually, late at night one night, reading a book together. And she would read a page, and I would read a page, and the name of the book was Intimate Issues, I think was the name. And it was not all about sex. It was about, communication, a whole bunch of areas in which you could increase intimacy within a couple. And on one page, the page that she was reading, it said, pornography can destroy a marriage and other sexual activity. It wasn't just pornography. And so she looked at me, and I had told her when we first got married that I used to struggle with pornography. That's a great lie that many men tell their spouses or their girlfriends, that I used to. That's not a problem I have anymore. And it might not be, and it was not when we got married. But it was a problem that I used to struggle with, but I had never dealt with it in the way that I should. And so she asked me the question, have you been looking at pornography lately? It's a tough question to get. I've had a few tough questions, and I've been able to answer them. This one I wasn't able to answer except truthfully. And I said, yes, I have been looking at pornography. Now, the miracle is, in this story, in this chapter, is that she continued reading. And on the next page, I remember that that it was on this page about the pornography, and on she had to flip the page, and on the next one was about forgiveness. And she read that, and she said, she laid the book down, and she said, I forgive you, but we're going to deal with this. And so right after that, the next week and a half or so, I think I went to the pastor, the associate pastor of our church in Portland, and I said, this is what I'm dealing with. And I told him everything I just told you. And he said, John, that's a pretty heavy thing, but I want you to go to Iron Sharpens Iron. And there's a man there named Rick Cardos, and I want you to meet with Rick. And so I went to the breakout, and I volunteered. That way I didn't have to pay for Iron Sharpens Iron. I keep my costs low. But I set up the chairs, and I went to the breakout, and there was Rick, and he asked me if and he has everybody to fill out the cards. And so I filled out the card, and a few days later I got a phone call from somebody else who said, hey, this is me. I've heard you're interested. Would you like to become a member? Would you like to join the group and come see me here at this time? And I did. And that was in May of 2014. And by June, I was in the group, and I have been in a group since 2014.
Wow.
So every week, more or less, sometimes snowstorms, whatever, but we want to support each other, because in the Bible, in Galatians 6, it says to bear each other's burdens. And as men, sometimes we got to bear a lot of another guy's burden. We got to, be there to morally and just to prayerfully support them. And so that's the type of thing. And now I've been able to lead a group for about 3 or 4 months now over in Portland. There are 2 groups right in southern Maine right now. And the greatest guys in the world. But we all have a thing. And they're a little bit different, but they're all the same genre, the same area of struggle.
So moving right along. Now, Erica, your testimony kind of differs a little bit from what Jessica Locke had last year. But we'll get into it after you give your testimony and how you got involved with the Nathan Project.
I was supposed to segue into this by saying one thing, and I should have. By learning the things that I learned, I should have told you.
Oh, okay.
And we had talked about it on the way down, so you should have known.
Oh, okay.
By learning the things that I learned in the Nathan Project,
All right.
because I was an absentee dad and an absentee husband. I mean, I was there on paper only. I remember I would leave in the morning at 6 in the morning. I would get back at 8:30 at night. I would fall asleep, drinking on the couch. There wasn't a lot of communication and together time for us, and not with me and the kids, and not with Erica and I. And so that caused a great deal of conflict and turmoil in her heart and in her mind. And she said, well, if I'm not going to be married with this man on a day-to-day basis, then why should we be married at all? And then we started the Nathan Project, but Erica had some things that she was dealing with. But because of the things that I had seen in the good men leading the Nathan Project, in the FMO group, the For Men Only group, I was able to recognize the struggles that Erica was going through. And it is because of the Nathan Project that our marriage was not destroyed. We believe that God saved our marriage. And we could have used a ham sandwich, I guess, but he decided to use the Nathan Project. And it will always have a special place in our hearts. And there's one man in particular, our first leader of the FMO, who's passed away now from cancer a couple of years ago. And he will always have an imprint upon my family's life, because it is because of his direct involvement and his encouragement to me, and his sharing of what he knew, that I was able to recognize the solution to the problems that we had. I was a very poor communicator. I guess I could always be better. But at the time, I was able to somewhat communicate some of these things to Erica. And that is a segue that I'm supposed to use.
Okay.
Because when we went through a tough time, she was dealing with things a little differently.
Okay, so your testimony, Erica, or is it safe now, or? Oh, no.
Well, a little bit about me is we had a little bit of a struggle when we became united together because of the past life that I had chosen, and that looked a lot like not having intimacy with anybody. I didn't want close relationships with anyone. I would push everyone away, and if we had a conflict, that was a good thing for me because then I could just walk away. And I was married before, and before we had gotten married, I got married at 20, but before that, I had gotten pregnant with his child.
Right.
And I was 17 years old, and I knew that that wasn't really going to fly. So I had an abortion, and I stuffed those emotions pretty deep. And so then we got married. I found myself at 20 pregnant again with the same person. And my mother said, I won't accept the baby unless you get married. And so we got married, and 3 years later, well, Toria was born, and then 3 years later, we got a divorce. And so from stuffing those emotions, I didn't know how to identify an emotion. I didn't know how to cope. I didn't have anything healthy going on up here or in here. And so men became my drug of choice with a side of alcohol. So I just kind of lived that life for years and years, and that's all I knew really, was just one relationship to the next, and I couldn't even keep female friends because everything was broken. There wasn't anything healthy going on. And so somehow I managed to keep a job and keep Toria alive, but but aside from that, there wasn't much healthy going on. And so I met another gentleman at 27, and he wasn't the kind of person that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with, but found myself pregnant again. And so I didn't want to put my daughter, who I had then, in danger, and I didn't want any ties to him. So I had another abortion, and I stuffed those emotions even deeper than the first, and never working through anything or even acknowledging that I had had either of those. The only time that it bothered me was on Mother's Day. I always hated Mother's Day, and I never knew why. And then John and I got married, and when I met him, he was so different from anybody I had ever known. I just thought he was perfect, and I thought he could save me. And when he failed me, I kind of went back to what I knew, seeking other men's attention and reaching out emotionally to different people, even women, just trying to get that void filled. Anything to not feel the pain, anything that would numb the pain. Yeah, and that blew up. As you can imagine, I had already been a single mom supporting myself financially and I guess emotionally and what have you. So I didn't need John for anything, and that became a problem because I was entirely too independent. And that was kind of a blessing and a curse, all wrapped in one little package. So once he joined FMO, he could identify the brokenness in me, although I couldn't see it. And so he was able to gently lead me to where I needed to go to get that help. And it turned out it was Rick and Vicky and a few other resources mixed in with that. I needed to do a couple serious Bible studies for having the abortions and work through that. That was a huge part. But what that looked like for me, I responded to his brokenness with rage and anger and sarcasm and alcohol and, talking to other men, and it just wasn't healthy. Nothing was healthy. So we imploded.
Okay. Now, so with in Erica's situation, the Nathan Project wouldn't put her in the same women's group as they would with Jessica Locke. They're
No.
180 degrees completely different circumstances.
Yes and no. Vicky wrote one of the curriculums that we're using now. It's called Storm, that I help the women go through. It's a 14-week study. And in that, although the curriculum was written to support the wives and allow them to express the pain that they've felt through their husband's addiction, there's so much in the curriculum about yourself and growing yourself that it's still applicable. I think in addition to that, anyone who struggled the way that I did and have the same issues that I have needs something in addition to that. We need a little bit more, maybe a different support group, and there are support groups out there for women who are addicts as well. But I will say that Vicky has done an amazing job writing it so that it's universal.
So what would you say to people watching this on either the internet or Nashua cable, and they're saying that John and Erica are just two red-blooded heterosexual individuals? I mean, if you see an attractive woman, you might smile or something like that, or you might smile if you see a good-looking guy or something like that, but you don't necessarily, act it out. I mean, what separates a red-blooded heterosexual from a full-fledged porn addict? What are some of the red flags that people might want to look for?
Sorry.
Oh.
I think for me, it would be the inability to communicate clearly and to hold a relationship. The inability to stay in a committed relationship. It was like a serial person that just goes from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and never plants their feet anywhere. Because at the base of sexual addiction, it's an intimacy disorder. So you want to get close, but you don't want to get too close. And anybody that comes too close, you want to be off to do the next thing. And I guess those are the red flags that he saw in me, and that we now are able to identify in other people that are unhealthy.
It would also be, to what do you run when you have a reason to celebrate? Do you run to alcohol? Some people, do you run to cake? Do you run to pornography? Do you run to flirting with other? If you are a man and you're married, I can speak to the marriage situation. If I were to say I'm having a great time, I need to go down to the bar where the pretty waitresses are. That would be something that would not be appropriate if you're a man and you're married for that reason. There's nothing wrong with going down with some friends and having a good time eating out or whatever. But it's that preoccupation. There's how it would just be to what, and the problem with that sort of addiction, one of the ways that you tell if something is an addiction, are you at a place now that 2 years ago you didn't think you would be at? In viewing the pornography, or are you going to see prostitutes, whereas 2 years ago you were just going to the bar? Or are you now doing things that are wildly further along the line of progression in the area of sex than you thought you would do 5 years ago or when you were a teenager? That's the area of addiction. Nobody ever sets out to do any activity and end up getting arrested at the end of it. But that's where some people have found themselves. And so that would be the difference between an addiction and a healthy appetite. And it's no different than a food appetite. What is the difference between enjoying a good Thanksgiving dinner and being a pig? What's the difference between enjoying the marital relationship or being a pig and going outside of the bounds of that marriage and really harming the one that you loved and that you made a vow to? And so that would be red flags for us in that area. There certainly is, and there are people out there who do not suffer from that problem. There are other problems to suffer from.
There you go.
Take your pick.
Yeah. Wow. And I know we talked, John, we talked a little bit on the phone a little bit about one basic red flag would be if you get disciplined or terminated from a job because they the employer finds you, they can modify, I mean, they can trace any computer activity in a company because it's their company. And if you spend hours and hours and hours on a porn site, that would be a blatant red flag saying if you get discipline or terminated, because you're not there to watch porn or anything like that. You're there to do a job, sell a product or sell a service. And if they catch you doing that, I mean, you should have enough common sense to say, well, I got a problem. I need help. I got to go to the Nathan Project or something like that.
Yeah, that sort of thing does happen. We've seen it happen in a couple of the groups. It would be no different than driving a car. When you drive your car, you go from point A to point B, you get out of your car and you go in and shop at a store. You don't get in your car and go to the store, but then keep driving and driving and driving and driving and driving because you would never get anything done at the store that you need to go back home and live your life. It's very similar to that in the area of pornography at work. You go to work, you do your job, and you go home. You don't go to work and get on the internet. Maybe you do for what your job. My job involves a lot of things that I do online. It's an online platform. For a lot of people, have that platform. But if they get on that platform and they go around and around and around, you're basically stealing from your employer.
Yeah.
You're not being productive. You're stealing from your employer at that point, taking money for hours not worked, plus breaking their regulations. That's the sign of addiction.
Yeah.
It's just like it would be the sign of a crazy person to get in the car and just drive around the store for hours. That doesn't make any sense, but neither does the inability to say, I'm at work right now. I'm not going to look at porn because I don't want to get caught. I don't want to get fired. I don't want the angst that it will cause my family and, coworkers. But they're not able to do that. Why not? Because they are addicted. Now, that might be a mild addiction, I suppose, in the whole line, less mild or more aggressive, but it is still something that they are unable to say, not right now, I just need to do my work. Instead, they say, I need this, and they do it, and they get fired. We've seen it before, and I've had one fella that was in the military say if he ever got caught, he would put his job so far into jeopardy it wouldn't be funny. So it's a hazard, getting online, and it's too bad. But it is a sign of addiction. Other than that, I can't speak too much to it. But
Yeah.
I think when you stop caring about what the consequences look like, you probably have something going on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I often heard like an alcoholism and stuff like that, drugs, you got to hit rock bottom before you can pick up your bootstraps and get out of it. So I think when you hit rock bottom and your boss calls you in for saying, we looked into these activities on your computer and this is unacceptable. So we're going to have to discipline you or fire you or something. And you say, wow, I have a problem. I got to get this looked into and addressed.
And you can choose that bottom, or it can be chosen for you. You can choose the rock bottom. Our rock bottom was when we were sitting there at night, and she said, have you been looking at this? That was my rock bottom. That was when that was my pivotal moment. That was the moment, that I decided.
Yeah.
Other people's moment is, I've been arrested. I've lost my job. My wife just divorced me. My kids saw me looking at it at night. They came downstairs for a drink of water. There are any number of types of rock bottoms, and they're different for everyone. See, there are a million different ways to do things wrong. There are or to harm ourselves, to act out an addiction. There's one way to be healthy. So there are a million different rock bottoms, is the point. And so I would encourage people, if they're watching this right now, to choose their rock bottom and not to let it be chosen for you.
Amen. Amen. Okay, so moving right along, possible remedies to porn addiction. Now, I heard it said, I'm not at a Nathan Project website or anything like that, that an individual, like when they're looking at Facebook bank accounts or something like that, they have their, first of all, do you share your passwords with each other?
Mm-hmm. We always have, actually.
So you can go on the same bank account, same Facebook pages,
Yep.
and anytime you want to.
We're
Anytime.
unified across the board on that stuff. Actually, on everything now, but we always were on that stuff.
Okay. And well, I can see like somebody like myself who never really had a problem with porn. I mean, I'd be apprehensive about getting into a relationship with a young lady or a marriage or something like that, and sharing my Facebook password and bank account passwords and stuff like that. But in y'all's cases, that you had to do something. You need to make some compromises. That's either that or you're not going to be married happily ever after.
That's a very common fear, what you just said. And that's really true. I'm not saying it's healthy, but it's very normal and common. Not that it's unhealthy. I mean, you don't want everybody to be able to see everything. But I've noticed a difference between men and women. A, they're a lot prettier than we are, right?
All right.
Two, is that they have a certain security need. And security to them in one area means transparency with their spouse. And so if you were able to enter into a marriage and be transparent in every area, you would assist your wife in a way that would be immeasurable, actually, because we can't feel that same need for security, I don't think. I've been trying to find a way to describe that, the parallel. I think we would call it a certain trust comfort. But for them, it's for what I've noticed in Erica is that it's deeper than that. It's, okay, he said he's going to be home in 20 minutes, and then he's home in 20 minutes. It's that sort of thing, but it's online. So she knows at any time she can look at anything on my computer, anything on my phone, anything, and it'll be okay. Or it won't be okay, but she can look at it, and she knows she can pick it up. And I won't say, oh no, give that back. It'll be, I might say, can I help you? What do you need, honey? Anything I can help you find, but she's welcome to look at anything. Doesn't matter. When we got married, we said we were one. We didn't want to be liars in that area.
We
had
failed
our
in
conflict.
others, but
So like special occasions, birthdays, Christmas, Valentine's Day, your anniversary, you kind of like to be surprised a little bit here and there. And, if you see, a withdrawal for like 80, 90 bucks from your bank account or on your credit card account for like Macy's or JCPenney saying, do you like to surprise each other on those days? Or because of your situation, you're saying, don't surprise me, just tell me what it is?
She's abandoned all hope of me ever surprising her.
yeah,
With, no.
pretty much. I understand what you're saying, and I think a lot of people may feel that way. We haven't. That hasn't been something that we've struggled with in that area. We always plan what we're going to do, even financially, and so we don't buy each other gifts like that. We're renovating our kitchen right now, and that's like our gift. Those are types of things that we do in our marriage, but I know other marriages are different, but that isn't an area that we've struggled with, though.
Okay.
Or if you buy it on the way home, and then she doesn't see the bank account before you give it to her, that's a good way to avoid everything you've just said. So there are ways. You have to be more creative, but we have found that we have to communicate in the area of money, because if we don't, it starts to get a little tense.
Okay. And the last thing, last year when I had Jessica and Andrew Locke on, they told me of a thing they have on their iPhones and regular computer, Covenant Eyes. Mm-hmm. And you had told me over the phone that you do have that on your computer and iPhone? Mm-hmm. Okay. So, I mean, a person who never had the problem you did, I mean, I would be annoyed if another individual from like Nathan Project calls me up and says, are you doing okay? I noticed you slipped up on something on the computer. I don't know. You tempted to say, that's none of your damn business. But then again, in your situation, you're saying that could mean, salvation for you to have a happy marriage and a happy to go on and stuff like that. You like covenant
from my
eyes.
perspective, I appreciate it and I understand it, and I'm glad that whoever came up with the software came up with it for his benefit and for other men who struggle in that area. From my perspective, it's annoying because I can't even look up bathing suits. But
Well, again, accountability in the Bible is always voluntary. It's never forced upon us. I don't have to give I mean, God knows everything. So in that respect, we don't really have much choice. And everyone generally agrees that the all-knowing God knows what's going on. But all of the accountability in the Bible is always voluntary. And so if we want true accountability and we want to grow in that area, we have to be accountable. And so I've made myself accountable to one, sometimes two people, depending. And so if I do something untoward, or I am the accountability partner for others, and if I get something saying that they've, it even comes into, if you look up certain hot words, hotspot words, that they will give me a text alert or an email. And so I'll be able to text that person and say, hi, Bill. Usually I'll just say something very generic. I'll just text him immediately and say, and by the way, accountability in this area of life means that men accountable to men, women accountable to women.
Mm-hmm.
We never cross, just because of the nature of this silliness. Yeah. And we try to encourage, husbands not to make their wives their accountability partner. That would be pretty hard on the wife if they saw some of the things. But so I will say, hey, Bill, how are you? And they'll usually respond back, and if they don't, then something. Maybe they're embarrassed, perhaps. But I always talk to them eventually, or give them a call later on if it's more appropriate, just to kind of let them know, hi, I'm here. And that accountability software does not stop you from going places necessarily. You can do whatever you want to do. You can even delete it. But some of these apps, the accountability apps, have it set up so that if you delete it, it at least notifies your accountability partner, hey, Bill deleted it. Okay, that's all it is. There's no control. It's just a knowledge and a voluntary accountability that says, I want to be well. I want to be rid of this obstacle between me and my God, and me and my spouse, and maybe even me and my children, because I don't want to stop being an absentee dad in every way. I want to be a better man, a stronger man. And this is just one more tool on the Batman tool belt that that makes us stronger men.
Okay. Moving right along, I came across an interesting quote. There was a lady. She's both an author and a blogger. She was on the Mike Huckabee show. And she mainly writes and blogs about marriage relationships. And she has a book called To Love, Honor, and Vacuum. Her name is Sheila Ray Gregoire. And on that show, she says the sexiest thing a couple could do together is pray together. And she added that when you pray together, they, with husband and wife, they expose each other's fears and vulnerabilities toward each other. Would you two agree or disagree with that?
I would tell you and the listeners that we did not pray together for the first 3 or 4 years of our marriage, and there was a really big block there. There was a big intimacy wall. It wasn't a healthy boundary. It was definitely a wall where I didn't want him to know things about me, and I think he probably felt the same. And then when we started praying together, our intimacy definitely grew in every area, and we became much closer. I don't know if I agree with the word sexy when you're talking about praying, but I appreciate where she's coming from. And yes, it did definitely help us become closer. I would encourage all couples to try that.
I think what she's saying is certainly true. It helps a couple grow closer together, what the lady Sheila Gregoire said. And when there are in the FMO groups, when there are single men, we had it come up not too long ago about a single man praying with a woman who is not his girlfriend and not his wife, of course. And I just think that it's sometimes wise in that area. There are many positives to it, but as a single man with a single woman, if you're alone and it's nighttime and you start praying with a woman, there is a level of intimacy there. You know, that's the way it was intended. Men praying with men, women praying with a husband, praying with a wife, a family praying together around the dinner table. There's intimacy there. But it's a tool that can be misused with a young man that's got his minds on more than just spiritual things that evening. And they might, it might, I did go to a Christian college many years ago now. It seems like just yesterday, a long time ago. And it seems like a lot of things would happen after the prayer service and after Sunday night service, after people got done praying together between single people on a Christian college that you wouldn't think would happen, but they did. And when I heard that, it kind of, and things that I've heard over the years, it kind of, I would encourage young men and young ladies to be careful about praying alone with the opposite. If you want to have, because what we're looking at when people get married is, when you get married, if you've been very, very promiscuous, you're bringing all of those experiences and all of those memories and that trail with you into the marriage. Just like somebody who has unrealistic expectations is coming into a marriage. And so there could be a lot of baggage there. So in order to avoid some of that baggage, we want to live our whole lives. And that includes, you know, just being careful, because she's right. It is a definite intimacy increaser.
Ah. Okay, so moving right along, a question I definitely asked Andrew Locke last year. I might have asked Rick Cardos the year before. Would you two view the magazines Maxim Stuff and FHM as pornography? Or how about the Victoria's Secret or Frederick's Hollywood catalogs? Would they be considered pornography? Even though the women are covered up their private parts, their quote-unquote private parts, would that still be pornography?
Well, we put a lot of thought into this, and we do have a boy who's under 10 years old. And anything that would come in the mail, we want to be very careful. You know, the average age to exposure, the first exposure to pornography, used to be over 12 years old. Now it's between 9.5 and 11 for boys and girls. Now, I was ahead of the curve at 8. You know, I like to get a jump start on things. So the interest can be piqued in a child, you know, boys and girls, if they see things that are conscious raising. So if they were to see a bunch of those sorts of magazines, if they were to see, like we'll say Hustler or Playboy or one of those, if they were to see them lying around and flipping through the pages, that would create an interest in them, because it's naturally curious. Boys are visual. And so the question
so
that
girls.
Well, girls are, yes. I can't speak to that.
Okay.
But when you have all those magazines coming through, if you were to have those coming into the house, you have to ask yourself, what am I trying to do for my children? What type of a legacy do I want to leave, and what sort of interest do I want to raise in them at this age? And so we would rather not have any of those come through our door. Now, for the ladies in the house, they do like to look at bathing suits and that sort of thing. When those come in, I honestly just put it face down in the corner, and I tell her that it's there, and I leave it alone. There's no need, you know, and so we try to be very careful about that. So that it's an overall exposure. It's not just the hard stuff, it's also the other stuff that might raise the awareness. Now, along with that, we do want to tell our sons and daughters that, or particularly, I tell my son, your mommy's very beautiful, your sisters are very beautiful. You know, this is the beauty that we look at on the inside, and it's nice when they look beautiful on the outside too. So there's a healthy awareness of beauty, but we don't want overexposure. So that's really, I hope that's specific enough for your question.
Yeah.
It's something that we tread very carefully with.
And also, I guess sometime, like, I don't know, maybe the 70s, maybe the 80s, that like Playboy, Hustler, and Penthouse were either forced or something to put like a plastic wrapper around their magazines. Do you think, would it probably be overdoing it to put plastic wrappers over the magazines I just mentioned? or Victoria's Secret or Fredericks or Hollywood, then probably nobody would read them then. I don't know, but
I guess not. The choice that we have made is that none of those will come in, to our home, to the best of our ability. And I did have somebody many years ago. They did something like they bought me a subscription to something, and it kept coming to my mailbox, and it wasn't me, but it just kept coming. And,
oh, it's a joke.
Yeah, like 2 or 3 times a year, I'd get something. It's like, my goodness, it just won't stop. But but none of that will come into the house, and any of those. So that's a choice that we make. And even TV shows are very careful about the not just the rating, but the content, the attitudes towards certain, like we don't. We're very intentional in all of our parenting, as much as we can be. We're going to have enough failures, and we just don't want to fail in the areas that we could have succeeded on.
I hear ya. So, okay. So, one thing I've always been curious about the Nathan Project. I mean, you compare like in Alcoholics Anonymous. They'll tell you maybe in a newspaper or something like that, they have regular meetings at 123 Main Street in Portland, Maine, every Monday and Thursday. Why does the Nathan Project vet their new people from coming into groups?
Well,
does Rick Cardos vet everybody, or can you like vet people in the Portland, Maine area?
Yeah, and if I have any questions about that, then I call up Rick or talk to another trusted advisor in that area, but always under Rick's, the Nathan Project's authority. But we do vet, and there are a lot of reasons for that. I had somebody call up in crisis not too long ago, 3 months ago, and I said, absolutely, let's meet, let's do this, and then they never showed up. So if I was just throwing out the names, throwing out the times, and letting people know, then they would never show up. I don't know why. It is the nature of an addict not to be honest. I believe that many times we intend to be honest, but we fall through on our commitments. And so they think, well, but then after 2 weeks of not looking at anything inappropriate, not acting out, no infidelities, no prostitution, no whatever, they think, okay, I'm getting better. It's been 2 weeks. I'm on this. I've got this. You know what, John? I don't need to meet. Or usually they don't call or text. And so that is a proving ground of sorts, but it's not really a harsh proving ground. It's, you find out, you think the first FMO meeting you go to, I don't know if the ladies think this yet, but you think that, oh my goodness, everybody there is going to have 2 heads with fangs and clubs, and they're going to hit me when I walk through the door, and they're going to be gross. It turns out we're all just normal Joes. And so it's kind of to lead that person from the belief of, hey, you're an anomaly, to believing, hey, you know what, we're all normal. We might not be healthy, but we're all normal. Come on in and meet, and let's see some guys here. So we do a couple weeks to kind of get them, like in the handing of a baton in a relay race. One person has to be running as fast as the other to hand the baton off. We have to get that person kind of moving a little bit, because right now they're stuck. They don't know. They're scared to death to drive to work because they've just been found out. They don't know anything. And so we really want to come alongside and say, hey, brother, let's do this.
Ah, okay. Now, I noticed that, well, both you sound very passionate and very committed to the Nathan Project. Do you foresee yourselves in the Nathan Project for the long haul? Or do you think you'll reach a plateau eventually in life where there's no need for the Nathan Project counseling in your lives and you might stop going, type thing?
I think maybe a little bit of both. We're very invested and we're very passionate about what the Nathan Project represents, what they do, and who they are. We've grown a lot as individuals and as a couple, and we're extremely passionate about being able to help other men and women with our own brokenness and share our stories and come alongside them and help them. I think that it would be unwise for John to stop going to meetings altogether, and I think that it would be unwise for me to stop learning about how I can become a little better and help other women in the process. So it might look a lot like maybe doing our own ministry along with Nathan Project, whatever God really has in store. But I don't see us walking away from the sexual addiction realm ever, really. If anything, we would love to broaden it.
Wow.
And there's that passion. You know, I remember being hopeless. A lot of it was brought about by the problems that we had. The thing that God used into our lives to save our marriage was the door of my pornography, looking at it and being addicted to it, not being able to stop, being up until 2 o'clock in the morning, drinking, looking at porn, and then going to church and telling people I've been working so hard, that's why I'm tired. Yeah, well, kinda. I was working at looking at porn.
Yeah.
And so but then you fast forward to my life to when she and I were on the brink of divorce. Like, I was expecting the papers. I didn't blame her because I'd been not a husband. Why should she stay married to a man, not her husband? But on the other hand, I remember being hopeless and forlorn and just desperately looking for help. There are other men and women out there going through that same absence of hope. If anything we could do would be to look at that woman and say, no matter what, there's hope for you, because we've seen those mistakes, we've made most of them. To look at a man and go, brother, I'm here, I've been there. Everybody's a little different, but we've all been there, and we've come back, and you can too. See, you could get divorced. A lot of people believe that there are only two choices: be married and unhappy, and divorced and happy. Well, the second choice is a lie, because if you have kids, it's definitely a lie, and I will say that on national TV and international TV.
I will too. Yeah.
It is a lie.
Yes, for sure.
But then there's choice C, which is always the right one to pick on a multiple choice, which is to be married and be happy. It can happen. And we're living proof of that, because we have been utterly miserable in our marriage. Utterly. But we've seen miracles, and through a lot of hard work, we've seen things improve in our lives. And so if we can help each individual person through the same door that we were helped, the Nathan Project, we're happy to do that. And if it's only one man and one woman and one family, then that's worth it to me.
Absolutely.
Because we were one family. So to get out of this, the life-saving business in the areas in which we were so endangered in life, nah, I don't really want to. I'm still hoping.
Okay. Wow. So time flies when you're having fun, eh, John and Erica? My producer told me we have about 5 minutes or so left to the episode's end. Is there anything that we talked about today that you'd wish to elaborate on, or something I haven't brought up which you'd like to address?
I do, but do you as well?
I think I said it all.
Oh, okay. Well, I did write down key words so I didn't forget.
Okay.
You know, again, there are men. I remember one time we were at a group, and it was so far away for the leader to come that he had to meet with men in that in-doc process for their startup process before the meeting. And I showed up a little bit early, and I saw the fellow, and I knew who he was. I happened to know, and I was excited. I didn't know he had a problem. I don't know, but I guess he did. And as I was there, he saw me and recognized me and knew why I was there, because I knew the group leader. Right? We're real detectives on this. He acted as if he was getting shot at in that room. He couldn't get out fast enough. He was scared to death that he would be recognized. From what I could see, I can't read his mind, but he was so embarrassed. The problem was he had forgotten his coat, and he had to come back into the room after it was all full, and it was freezing outside, so he needed his coat. Well, I guess sometimes husbands and fathers and single men, they think that the ground will open up and swallow them. Maybe it's a pastor. maybe it's a deacon, maybe it's a local political leader. They think if they tell this problem that they have with, oh, I don't know, it could be anything sexual, and I mean anything. We've seen it all. There is no flavor that we have not seen. And so they think the ground will open up and swallow them, and so they live in fear and they keep those secrets. They think if I tell somebody this, I'll lose my job, I'll lose my family, I'll lose my prestige, I'll lose my power, I'll lose my position. In reality, that will happen. But if you come clean, that will happen if you don't come clean. You continue on in your addiction, whatever it is, because it'll get worse and you will be worse off. Your rock bottom will get chosen. But if you give it up and you say, I've had enough of this, I would like help, and you reach out to something like the Nathan Project, a ministry, and then you get tied into a group. Now, if at that point somebody finds you out, you've got other men to support you, strong men, a strong process, a strong group, and they will assist you, and they've seen what you've been through already, and they'll be able to guide you through it. And so my encouragement is to have that freedom and that hope and that acceptance. You know, there is great freedom in the truth. If you keep a secret and somebody says, hey, you did this, you're scared to death. But if I tell 1,000 people what I did, and then somebody says, hey, you did that, and I say, well, duh, I just told 1,000 people. It doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
Now, it has to be appropriate, but there's great freedom. And the first step of that is the Nathan Project. You know, and then you'll be guided through the process. There's nothing we haven't seen, I can assure you. We're there. We're here, and we love to help. And it is a biblically based program, and it helps the wives. Without the direct, it helps the wives, and it has made our children, you know, more content. We still have our struggles, but there are things in which we've been able to help them as well. And we just would love for everyone to see the freedom. When Christ said, I will make you free indeed, he wasn't lying. The truth will set you free. It will set you free. The ground didn't open up and swallow us.
No.
So that's great. So if this has been a blessing to you, definitely log on to nathanproject.net. And there's a lot of interesting factoids surrounding the porn addiction dilemma that people may find fascinating. Not to mention, you may find, like, if you maybe having a problem yourself, maybe you can identify with some of the red flags mentioned on that website. And other than that, look forward to hearing your testimony again in a couple of hours at the Trinity Baptist Church. That's I'm kudos out to the Trinity Baptist Church here in Nashua for having the Nathan Project. Well, at least 2 years in a row that I'm familiar with. And but anyway, we hope that you enjoyed the episode today, and we hope that you'll enjoy and join us again for another episode of Frankly Speaking. Thank you very much, and God bless.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.